Why hello, my valued travelers and seekers of amusement and entertainment. It is I, the Lunar Skald, here to regale you with stories, tales, and sagas of all kinds for your entertainment and interest. And for this video, do we have a doozy here? Yes, I know, normally I do multiple stories, but this one, I have to make it a little bit cut for one particular reason. I only have so much time before I go off to see someone I haven't seen in quite some time, so I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible, but I will balance it out with enough time to show that this is a story of quality. And, well, let's just go ahead and start by saying, have you ever came across players who, after their character dies, they just bring in that character's brother, who just so happens to look, act, and perform exactly like the character that just died? You know that one? Well, imagine what we have for this story then. This is a tale known as The 7 Characters of That Guy, hosted by Sivad6293. Enjoy. I posted a couple of horror stories before, and in one story, I mentioned about a that guy in my group, who I dubbed Sir Not Appearing in This Story. Well, I have a horror story about the guy. This happened over the course of a few years. He was one of the original players of my game, starting all the way back in 2016. He was also mildly autistic. My brother is autistic as well, so I couldn't help but relate to his issues. He wasn't as far off as my brother was, but having that made me sympathize with him, and regrettably, I let him get away with stuff more than I should have. Now that I'm older and a little wiser, I can see that he was that guy clearly from day one. I won't mention his name for obvious reasons. Instead, I'll be referring to his actions based on what character he was playing as. Think of this as chapters, so let's get this underway. Chapter 1. Orion. Orion was his first character. Back then, the group comprised of Orion and Jonathan, 2 human paladins, and a dwarf Iron Skull. This was the first arc in the game, and I was a brand new DM. I was nervous and wanted everyone to have a good time, and hoped I was making a good story. Orion was the type of paladin who had some healing spells, yet never healed anyone. Not even himself. Not even using any spell. We were all pretty much new, so I was patient and thought that he would eventually learn. He never did. He left the game after that first arc, but returned later. By this time, the game had grown significantly. He had some added backstory, finding a necromancer that was his arch enemy, and I weaved that into the campaign. The necromancer would be working with a cult that tried to bring back an ancient vampire lord in exchange for learning how to become a lich. Despite the non-healing shit, Orion did not have many issues. Until he died, that is. To date, Orion was the first character in my game to die, and it was through stupid means. The party had been captured, framed for a crime they did not commit. They tried to escape but failed. Orion had enough, and he decided to put Iron Skull's name to the test, and admirably, a really funny situation. He and another player decided to use the dwarf as a battering ram. They used the dwarf as a battering ram because his name was Iron Skull. What's even worse, it worked. Iron Skull agreed to this too, though by the end he had suffered major damage and passed out. Orion bolted out of the door and fought his way out. The party argued if they should follow him or not. As they argued, Orion failed some important roles and was captured by the guards. He was considered too dangerous and was hung that day. Most of the party did not seem to care. I was a little upset, but helped that guy with his next character. Okay, other than from the really hilarious putting Iron Skull's name to the test, yeah, I could see where there are a couple of problems. First, starting off is that, well, he isn't really using his support role very well. The whole point of being a paladin is that, yes, you basically are sort of a bit of a triforce. You can deal damage, you can tank, but that third part is also incredibly important. The healing. Because if you do not heal, well, then that means members of your party might just die, and combat is going to be a little bit more difficult. So keep this in mind. If you have healing spells, use them. And don't just focus on the damage. I did that when I was trying out the druid class for the first time, and I didn't really have any healing spells. So, yeah, I ended up having my communist druid go out as a bear, and she nearly died. So keep that in mind, everyone. Next character, Chapter 2, Ved. Ved was a rogue who multiclassed as a sort of necromancer-like character. His father was a member of the occult and had a Necronomicon. He was the edgiest character that he ever made. He wasn't crawling in my skin, depressed all the time, but he did stand out from the rest of the party. He was also the youngest character of the party, coming in at 17. There were several incidences with Ved that I hated. One incident revolved around him being bored out of character, during a heartfelt moment between two players in character. The Roll20 message popped up saying that he was rolling for stealth. I asked him why he did that. He said, "I'm going to sacrifice a little girl." I was horrified. Not only was he going to kill a little girl in-game, but he had no in-game reasoning for it. When I asked him why the hell he would do that, he said, "Because I'm bored." I talked with other people about it, and some of them actually railed against me for how I responded. Maybe I should have just had more guards on patrol that night and give him the chance to do it rather than breaking immersion. Maybe I could have done something else, but I was absolutely horrified and uncomfortable with the situation. I flat out told him no. I stood my ground, he complained, but eventually relented. He wouldn't give me a good in-character reason as to why he would suddenly want to kill a little girl in that way other than he was bored. If he had, I might have let him attempt it, but I will not stand taking the spotlight from other players while they have their RP moment just because someone is bored. After that incident, thankfully Ved lightened up and seemed to be gearing up for a bit of redemption. Eventually he met an NPC that he liked that was a bit of a trickster rogue, that decided to prank the birthday of another NPC the party liked. Over time their relationship developed and it was actually sweet. And then the succubus incident happened. The party was tracking down the cult from before into this haunted mansion, and it ended with a boss fight with a powerful succubus queen. She charmed Ved and was able to mind control him to attack the party. After combat though, things got weird. Ved stated that because of the succubus controlling him, he had a sexual awakening. And as soon as he got home, he decided to sleep with his favorite NPC. Charisma checks later, he did the deed, as awkward as it was to get to that point. Quick fade to black and I went to the other players. I decided that there can be consequences to this, so I rolled some saves for the NPC. Sure enough, she got pregnant. When Ved found out, he decided to retire from adventuring in order to raise his new family. It was actually a sweet ending for the character. Well, so yeah, I can't deny that that was a pretty sweet ending for Ved. However, I definitely do find it a little bit odd that because he was charmed by the succubus that it led to a sexual awakening. That one was a little bit odd, I'm not going to lie, but other than that, I think it was handled decently well, so I can't really say that it was all that bad. However, there is still the very big problem that happened earlier, and that was when he really wanted to just steal the spotlight from another group of characters and be like, I want to sacrifice a little girl, with no in-character reason. And I mean, I get that, yes, you're a necromancer or rogue, so I guess maybe you just wanted to, you know, raise the dead of a little girl. Okay, yeah, that's still a bit of a yikes, but I mean, still, that's just rude for multiple reasons, of which should be incredibly obvious. And I'm pretty sure this is not meant to be an evil campaign, as far as I can tell, so that would have been... Yeah, I don't really see where that would be going. I'm also further surprised that there were people who thought that that was just rude of the DM to stop that moment because it was immersion breaking. I really don't like that, because the DM is a part of the game as well. You can't really just say, DM, you should be doing this and allowing this, even though you don't want it or you're uncomfortable with it. No, the DM is a person as well. Do treat them like that, especially since they did set the whole thing up, and for you to be able to play in it. There are times where the DM is wrong, and this is not one of them. Anyways, moving on to Chapter 3, 0. After Vet knocked his girl up, that guy wanted to roll a new character. This time his character concept was one of the best we came up with. He wanted me to help him with his backstory, and he liked my idea. He was basically a demigod. At first, that sounds bad, but he didn't have the exact powers of what you would expect a demigod to have. Zero was basically mortal, but he was the child of a chaos god who had multiple children. This chaos god wanted an heir to the throne, so he pitted his children against each other in a Highlander-esque battle. Everything went well, until I made another new DM mistake. I gave him a weapon that was OP. I didn't realize it until combat how broken the sword was. To fix it, I decided to add some debuffs. His father saw how well he was doing with the sword and decided to curse it, hungering for blood and becoming more corrupted with each person killed. He would need to get the sword cleansed at the price of weakening it. Instead, he chose to just have the character leave after the major battle in the city. Just like that, so I never got to do the Highlander-like story that sounded so cool. So I definitely get where the OP is coming from this. It's definitely really disheartening to see such a cool character concept and a really cool story that could come from it, and suddenly it's just gone like that. Like, not even the character being dead, it's just gone. However, I do kinda have to criticize a little bit about how OP handled this. Again, this is a new DM mistake, and I completely understand that, so the situation couldn't possibly be, reworked in a perfect way either. However, I do have to at least offer a bit of criticism, because this could definitely lead to a very bad situation had that guy actually taken advantage of the curse. And that curse is that it is hungering for blood, and becoming more corrupted with each person killed. Do you see the problem? The problem is that if that guy was also going to be that much more of a that guy would have also been a murder hobo. Kind of a little bit like Ved, but again, that's still a really big problem that could lead to a murder hobo situation. And if you don't know what a murder hobo is, let me explain. A murder hobo is basically somebody who, regardless of the consequences or anything of the sort, just goes off murdering NPCs for no reason. And they just keep murdering, and it ends up leading to a lot of consequences, not just for that character, but also could potentially lead to consequences for the party. And nobody, unless they were doing a murder hobo campaign, is gonna be okay with it. Or, at least they're okay with the murder hobo stuff going on. But either way, most of the time it's just going to lead to a lot of problems, and I would highly not recommend doing that. So I do hope that the OP does learn from that mistake, and doesn't make a curse like that again, because that could lead to huge problems, unless, once again, it's a murder hobo campaign, and everybody's agreed to it. Moving on to Chapter 4, though. Benito was brought up in at the one-shot for a Halloween game. It took place in the main D&D world, so he decided to play as a business associate of a regular character I had. I'll stop with the Italian accent at this moment, but I hope it was a little bit funny, I just had to. A snake oil salesman-like merchant who would try to con the players. He randomly named this character after another Benito, as in... his full name was Benito Mussolini. Yes, that Mussolini. See why I decided to stop with the Italian accent right there? Yeah, that's the reason. Benito wasn't that bad of a character, just more of a how can I con people kind of way. I don't think that makes it better, since I'm more than positive that is literally how Benito Mussolini got into power and brought fascism to Italy. I don't think that made it better, OP. I'm just pointing that out. His name just stood out. He was the second character to have died. The group had broken a cardinal sin in D&D. They split the party. Not only that, but they split them in the worst way. Having the two fighter characters go upstairs and the squishier Benito and Rogue go to the basement. Naturally, the basement had the worst enemies down there. A Mind Flayer. The Rogue stealthed and Benito failed his role. The Mind Flayer saw him instantly. Benito tried to defend himself, but one quick Mind Blast popped Benito's head like that scene from Scanners. I gave him the stat blocks to a Mind Flayer and let him play as one to make up for the sudden death. And that's why you never split the party. Especially if you are extremely squishy like a wizard. Well, I mean, definitely not the best way for this to go out, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily too torn up because, this character was sort of it was dedicated to Benito Mussolini, so I'm not too torn up about this character dying. I'm once again, I'm not saying this is the best way to out a character, but at the same time, I'm not too broken up about it. Moving on to chapter 5, I believe? Yes, 5. Or, wait, hold on, chapter 5. I'm sorry, I lost count. Kylo. Oh boy, we can already tell this is gonna be a good one. Kylo was made for a different campaign. I ran to take a break from the main one. I was in a Star Wars craze, and someone made a Star Wars 5e game, so I decided to make a story. Kylo was an assassin droid from the Clone Wars that wanted to amass an army of Sith droids and go full Skynet. Oh no, not the Sith! I'm kidding, anyways. My players enjoyed this campaign, as it had an increased sense of difficulty. Blasters were a thing, and the players had to keep them in mind. Season 2 was the first real combat of the game. Everyone took cover, but he thought he could kill a rebel. He ran up to a rebel and attempted to shoot him. He ran up to the rebel at point-blank range. That rebel had what was basically a Star Wars version of a shotgun. And his turn was right after Kylo's. The rebel rolled up, and as if God himself demanded it, it was an nat 20. Oops. Kylo was pissed. He was furious, telling me that it was unfair. I was like, dude, you ran up to a guy who I described earlier as having a shotgun. You got into point-blank range. His argument was, but I'm a droid, I can't die. Dude, the droids in Clone Wars died all the time, okay? But I'm a commando droid, I'm supposed to be tougher. He left the Discord call right after. The issue was that I would have very easily brought him back. It could have been like what happened to C-3PO in Empire. He could be put back together, but he left the session abruptly, and I paused it there. We continued on with the game, but he hadn't shown up. For almost a full month. It was as if he ghosted us. We were sick of his shit by that point, and players had complaints about him. Out of character, he would name-call and make poor-tasting jokes that were more awkward than funny. Oh, I'm starting to wonder about what those jokes were, and this might be a little bit of a long call, but I'm wondering if it has any relation to the Benito Mussolini homage that he had for his last character, but I can't be too certain. I'm simply just sort of speculating is all. He eventually returned. Turns out he was in a very bad car accident and had been in the hospital for a while. Immediately I felt like an asshole and welcomed him back to the game. I told him that I could bring Kylo back, but he refused. He had another idea. Kek. Kek's full name was Kek. He was a Force-sensitive Jawa. This was apparently a thing in Star Wars The Old Republic, so I okayed it. There was not much to talk about with Kek. In this game, rather than the milestone level-ups that I would usually do, I decided to do EXP the traditional way. Because of this, when Kek decided to skip out on games, he missed out on a lot of EXP. If he missed out on more than one game, I'd run the game without him. Then he'd complain how underleveled he was before I told him that if he didn't show up for the games, then he wouldn't get stronger. At the end of the Star Wars campaign, he didn't bother showing up, so he never leveled past level 3. Yeah, that one's kinda on you, Kek, or that guy, whichever. But yeah, kind of important. If you want to be able to see your character get stronger and be able to do more things, then show up for the games. It's kinda that simple. You can't just, expect things to... You can't just not expect your character to be underleveled if you're not showing up for the sessions. That's just kinda how it works. So keep that in mind. Nico, Chapter 6. Finally, there was Nico. The last oh no wait, Kek was Chapter 6. Nico was Chapter 7, I'm such an idiot. Anyway, finally there was Nico, the last character he played as before he was promptly booted. This was once again in my main campaign. Nico was a sorcerer who was a steel dragon in disguise. We looked at the lore to learn more about the steel dragons. Apparently, steel dragons regularly pretend to be mortal races to learn experience from them. When that one life is over, they change into another person, forgetting everything about that previous life except for the fact that they were a dragon. When a steel dragon actually dies, it gets to relive all the memories from all its lives, and then it's judged by Bahamut in order to decide if it's worthy to go to Dragon Heaven, or if it needs to do it all over again. That kind of sounds like, Hinduism or Buddhism with reincarnation and nirvana, so not really Christian heaven. And believe me, I don't really think anybody actually wants to go to Christian heaven when you realize what that place is about. I asked him how that happened, but Nico, however, forgot that he was a dragon. I asked him how that happened, and he said, I'll leave that up to you. Okay, really? One of the most important concepts of your character, and you decide, I'll let the DM handle that part instead of yourself. Somebody who would probably be interested in maybe having the most interesting part of your character figured out. At least playing a role in it. I get asking help, but just having that entire thing left to the DM. I don't know about that. After a while of writer's block trying to find out what happened to make him forget, I was stuck with an idea and went with it. It was going to be some of my best work yet. However, there was an incident that should have been the final straw. It caused a lot of grief to me that was just baffling. The big bad evil guy was a black dragon who has many children. He and his mate are very protective of their children. If one gets hurt, the parents will know. Since the flight is connected to each other. I explained this. I explained this several times throughout the years in the main campaign. Everyone knew it. Many characters explained this to them, so there were no questions that they knew about it. It was mainly a means to keep my players from challenging the dragon before they were a high enough level. But Nico did the unthinkable. Nico found a young black dragon. The black dragon was minding its own business when Nico decided to attack the dragon. Since it was a young dragon, he was high enough to kill it, and after multiple, "Are you sure you want to do this?" and prevent what was coming from happening, he managed to kill the dragon, mutilate its body, and eat its flesh. Okay, I get the whole idea of maybe eating your enemies alive, but, that's a dragon. That is where I draw the line there. It's one thing if, cannibalism happens, I'm okay with that, but eating a dragon's flesh? How dare you! Anyway, I had no other choice. BBEG's mate came in and she was furious. Oh yeah, and also that happens. So another reason not to mess with dragons. It's gonna lead to situations like this. She tracked Nico down and was ready to kill him, but Nico kept trying to talk her down out of it. He thought that a high charisma check would basically be a mind control, which by the way it most certainly is not, keep that in mind, where he could get away with absolutely anything. It is not. Remember this. Anyways, his big persuasion check? Your son was a dick. Fortunately, I'm not the type of DM who will allow anything to pass with a high charisma check. This mortal had just killed her son and tried to get away with it. There was no talking her down. She was out for blood. We get into this argument that halted the game until I called it and basically retconned the entire situation, null and voiding it so it never happened. I was absolutely sick of his shit. He later approached me in DMs telling me that he wanted to try a different character. One that broke the straw. He wanted a character who was undead. If this character ever died, he'd just come back with a completely different personality. I do not allow immortal characters in my games, so I shut it down. I then decided to quietly open a new Discord server, since he had offered to make a server for me in the first place, and I would quietly leave with the party, kicking him from the game. However, he found out. He told me to hurry and copy-paste my stuff on his Discord because he was going to throw this shit out. He changed my tag from Dungeon Master to Failed Clone. He had some friends play some Clone Wars game. I left right after that, sick of his shit. Me and the players were tired of his constant shit. The name calling, the abuse, the constant changing of characters every time something didn't go his way. I kept him in the group because I sympathized with him. But I couldn't any longer. TLDR. That guy constantly changes characters every time something doesn't go his way. Makes stupid choices that gets his character killed, insults player and DM, wants to make an immortal character, and then gets all pissy when the group has had enough of this garbage personality and makes a new server. Oh, wow. Okay, there is definitely a lot to unpack with this one. For starters, thinking that high persuasion checks are going to be able to get you out of any and every situation. No. Like any good story, just because a person has a high amount of charisma or maybe makes a convincing argument, that does not mean even the NPCs are just going to drop all of their logic and emotions just to do what it is that you are saying. Like, in this particular situation, or maybe why don't we make a similar comparison? When Cersei loses Joffrey, when he's dead, there is no way you are going to convince her to not, want the person she thinks is responsible for it dead. You are not going to convince her either way. I mean, seriously, have you seen just how emotionally torn up she was about it? Or maybe another Game of Thrones. Well, actually, there are plenty of Game of Thrones characters you could probably relate this to. But the point boils down to, if somebody's not going to listen to you, it doesn't matter how charismatic you are or how convincing your argument is, you're not going to just make them do whatever just because you say so. That's not how persuasion works. They can work to a certain extent, like any persuasive or diplomatic situation. So always keep that in mind. Second of all, when the DM is warning you constantly not to mess with the BBEG or anything in relation to them at this moment, and are warning you constantly, especially with, are you sure about this? That definitely means if you do this thing, there are going to be some huge ass consequences for this. I mean, good on the DM for allowing this to be retconned, I will say. But I will have to state once again that the OP wasn't entirely correct with how they did things. Trying to quietly, get that guy out of the party and just, take the entire, to take everybody else to join a new campaign and just be like, yeah, we're not bringing this one person, that obviously, of course, was going to lead to some big problems down the line, and as we saw, that did not go well. Because why would you expect it to go well the moment that that person who was just ghosted and everybody is just like, and then when they find out, of course they're gonna be pissed at you. So really, I think the EOP could have handled this situation a little bit better by saying, look, I understand that there have been some difficulties, but I do have to air out the grievance that you have not really been the best player in this campaign. And the other players, and I would actually recommend that the other players be involved and not just speak for them so that they can actually voice their concerns as well. I understand this is a hard thing for anyone to do, but having a talk saying that this just isn't working out is probably the best way to go. Again, don't speak for the players, just speak for yourself and allow other players to speak for themselves as well. Don't just drag them into it and have them and just speak for them, because that's not really fair to them, because maybe their concerns weren't exactly your concerns. Maybe they didn't mind the player as much as other people may have or you have. So it's always important to keep people informed and, involved in situations like this. Trying to secretly get away from someone, while it may seem like, the more, the option you want to go for, it's definitely not the best way either, because it leads to problems like this. I mean, I do understand that that guy was just not the best person to be around at all. I mean, they did some pretty bad things, but at the same time, this also wasn't the best way to handle it, so whenever you get into the situations like this, as tempting as it might be to just, silently leave this alone, it's best to just say, hey, we kind of want to do something else, and we're not going to be able to work with you. And the OP did try to work with them, but that guy wasn't listening. So it was only going to end in this situation. Just tell that guy that they aren't really welcome at the table because they haven't really been that cooperative of a player and aren't really accepting of the consequences. That's the way I'd end it, or at least the way I would say that I'd end it, but at the same time, I'm not really someone who is very good with confrontation, but this is the advice I'm giving, and I know it's a difficult bit of advice, but this is what I would recommend. Anyways, that'll be all for this story, and I have one more thing I'd like to let off. So, I have a Twitch channel, but I haven't really been using it, and I had a little bit of an idea last night. I was wondering if maybe anybody would be interested in me watching, and people being interested in watching me put together some of my Warhammer 40k models. I currently have an Adeptus Sororitas Exorcist available that just came in, and I am pretty excited to put that baby together. However, for the future, or maybe for this one, I just want to know if anybody would like to see me, just assemble it, and for any other models that I get in the future, which I do plan on getting. But at the same time, I also have money concerns at the moment, so I'm not going to be doing that too soon, but anyways, that's just kind of what I'm giving out for this point. So if you are interested, do let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see more RPG horror stories like this, or anything else in my content that is interesting to you, subscribe. And of course, I wish you all to have a wonderful evening with the Lunar's embrace. Farewell.